So yesterday we discussed a lot about motivation, inspiration, etc., etc. I hope by now you are well aware of what you wish to do. Okay, because from today onwards we'll discuss the important concepts of history optional, and while doing so we'll start with the first part, that is ancient India. But before understanding that, I wish to make you aware about the word history itself. These questions will not be asked in the exam, but understanding them is very important for the part of your personality. Such questions will be asked to you in your interview. What is history? And then you will fumble. Ancient, medieval, modern world, that is not history. That is just the periodization of history. So we start with the word history. This word history comes from the Greek word historia, and the literal meaning of this is investigation or inquiry. So what we are trying to do? We are trying to investigate into the past. History is all about the past. That's why some people say it's a dead subject. कि जो लोग मर गए हैं, जो चीजें चली गई हैं, we only talk about that, है ना? So history is always about the past, but it's a kind of inquiry, and this is what you need to understand. This is the first objective of today's class, that the literal meaning of history is investigation into the past events. I'll tell you all those things, how that investigation is done, what are the sources for doing so. But first, the word history should be very clear to you. We have given you this concept list, है ना? आपको एक लिस्ट मिल गया है, इसमें काफी सारे कंसेप्ट लिखे हुए हैं. हम स्पेसिफिकली कल इन पे बात करेंगे, बट टुडे आई एम गोइंग टू डिस्कस ईच एंड एवरीथिंग, एंड आप साइड में टिक करते रहना कि व्हाट इज कवर्ड एंड व्हाट इज नॉट कवर्ड. व्हाटएवर विल बी लेफ्ट विल डिस्कस इट टुमारो. But today I am just going to make fundamentals for you. Okay, so this is the first thing. Plus, whenever we talk about history, we also need to understand the scope of the subject. Do you understand the meaning of this? Scope. Scope roughly means the area which will be covered by it. When UPSC is going to ask you question, ये तो हमें समझ में आ गया है कि it is divided into ancient, medieval, modern and world, but the scope means the areas of history which will be asked. So we need to have a basic understanding of political history, economic history. Just see today's society. Whatever we can cover into one or the other part, that will be covered by history. Polity of the times of Rig Veda, economy of the times of Harappan Civilization, society of the time of Mahajanpada period. So questions are going to come from various parts. So if we see today's life, what all is relevant to us today? We are aware about our polity. We know a certain way in which the Indian's economy is moving. So whenever questions will be asked in history, they are going to ask you, you have to paint a picture of the economy of the Vedic period. So when we talk about the scope, these are the various scope, along with the aesthetic sense. The aesthetic sense comes from art and architecture. Okay, so these various themes will be asked to you under the subject of history. So in a way, history records the past event, and these past event may belong to the polity of that time, economy, society, as well as technology, culture, religion, even art and architecture. These are the various categories of theme which will be covered by us. Alright, so I hope this is clear to all of you, all the online students. I hope this is clear. The meaning of history is investigation or inquiry into the past events, and whenever we discuss about these past events, we try to understand the polity, economy, history, society, all those things we try to understand. That's why history becomes a very dynamic subject. Suppose you read political science, so you only read one aspect of it, political science. हमें वहाँ पे economy पढ़ने का इतना जरूरत नहीं है. But when we read history, we have to read polity, economy, society, art and architecture, everything will be covered. That's why you'll get to understand the basic keywords of all these subjects while discussing history itself. जब भी हम economic theme पढ़ेंगे, we'll discuss about inflation, we'll discuss about money lending, we'll discuss about all those aspects which you'll study even in the general studies. This is one very good advantage of history as an optional, कि हमें हर चीज के कीवर्ड समझ में आ जाते हैं. ठीक है, जैसे लेसिस फेयर है, ऑल ऑफ यू नो व्हाट इज लेसिस फेयर ऑल अबाउट, इट इज फ्री मार्केट इकोनॉमिक्स. तो ऐसे वर्ड्स हम भी यूज करेंगे अपनी पूरी हिस्ट्री में, कहीं ना कहीं कुछ ना कुछ हर सब्जेक्ट के बेसिक कवर हो जाते हैं. लाइक व्हेन वी डिस्कस अबाउट पॉलिटी, विल डिस्कस अबाउट वाज इट डेमोक्रेटिक और नॉट. ये सारा चीज आप पॉलिटी में पढ़ते हो कि डेमोक्रेसी है या फिर नहीं है. विल डिस्कस अबाउट वाज इट मोनार्किकल और रिपब्लिक. So all these basics of these subjects we have to develop along with studying history. So this is a very good advantage and you should try to take it because वो आपको prelims में बहुत help करेगा eventually. But this is the first thing which I wanted you to understand. The meaning of history is mostly about investigation, inquiry, and this inquiry will have this kind of scope. There can be further major subheadings also, but I am not going into that. रीजन बीइंग इवेंचुअली आप वो समझ जाओगे, बट अभी हम बहुत बेसिक लेवल पे बात कर रहे हैं. ठीक है. नाउ द सेकंड इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग, हाउ शुड वी डिवाइड हिस्ट्री. हाउ शुड वी डिवाइड हिस्ट्री. देयर शुड बी सम बेसिस ऑफ डिविजन. कुछ तो बेसिस बनाना पड़ेगा. इफ वी सी हिस्ट्री फ्रॉम द टाइम्स ऑफ स्टोन एज टिल यस्टरडे, ठीक है, टिल यस्टरडे, how do we divide that? There should be some criterias on the basis of which we can divide the history. Look, all this division are done by us for better understanding the subject. Whenever we study society of a specific part, they have staticness as well as dynamic characteristics. All right. So what we do, we try to divide it into bigger parts. All right. So initially, as all of you know, in India, when we talk about history, the major focus came during the time of the British, the initial school of thought known as the Orientalists. They developed these various institutions like Asiatic School of Society वगैरह बना दी इन्होंने. So what happened because of that? Because of this, we were now aware about our past. And one after the other major discoveries were done. Like all of you know, H.T. Prinsep was the person who was able to decipher the inscriptions of Ashoka. Similarly, the discovery of Harappan Civilization, this was done by John Marshall. The announcement came in 1924, even though excavation started by 1921. So the British has played a very important role in making us understand our own history. But the caveat was these people wanted to use the historical events to justify their rule. That's why they distorted our history. Even though history writing began, but right form of history, the fundamentals of writing history, that was incorrect. But anyway, the initial periodization, it was done on the basis of religion. That's why the whole ancient past, this was known as Hindu period. With the coming of the Turks, they say it was Muslim period. And then they did not say Christian period. They said it was British period. Why should they give credit to Christianity? They should give credit to their own homeland, Britain. So this was the first periodization of Indian history. Part of it was on the basis of religion. But do you think it is justified to use such a kind of periodization? One problem is it should not be on the basis of religion. Like in ancient India, we did not only have the Hindus, we also had the Buddhists like Ashoka, right? He was giving patronage to Buddhism. So for that period, we should also insert the Buddhist period. But is it feasible? It is not feasible. We also has Jain as a religion, which was powerful during those times. So this periodization is flawed. And second, as I've already told you, had they used religion as a basis, why did they choose the British period instead of the Christian period? That is a question we are asking. We are not saying applying that would make it a correct form. It will still remain incorrect. But as per the logic, that should be done, right? So this was eventually rejected. We have to find more criteria on the basis of which we can divide the India's periods of history. So eventually, if we see, it was divided into ancient India, then medieval, and finally we see the division into modern India. Okay, these are the three divisions which were done eventually. Ancient period, roughly, it starts from 2 million years ago all the way up to 750 AD. Okay, roughly. Previously, medieval period, they used to say it starts roughly from 750 AD. But starting from 750 all the way up to 1192, when we see the beginning of the Turk rule, the famous second battle of Tarain, right? That was fought. So that's why now we have inserted one more period known as early medieval period. Okay. So this is now being used in the periodization of Indian history. Previously it used to be only ancient, medieval and modern. But now we have ancient, then we have inserted early medieval period, then we have medieval by the end of 12th to 17th century. 18th century onwards we have the modern period. Okay, so this is the rough periodization which you have to remember. And what is the basis for doing so? The basis for this is large scale political and socio-economic changes. When such kind of shift can be seen in the society, political setup, economy, then only we should divide it into some periods. But still, there are still some flaws in this. We are not saying this is perfect. In the future, this can also change. Okay, why this can change? The problem is, whenever we think in terms of ancient India, do you think every state of India has similar kind of history? No, it doesn't have, right? So using this for all parts, it's always going to be difficult. The second thing which you can see, evolution in each and every part of India has not happened in the same manner. That's why using these for the sake of understanding is fine, but we cannot say that this is the final one. These things I'm making you understand, because when somebody talks to you in these academic terms, you should be able to open your mouth and at least enlighten that person. Plus in your interview, which will be, I know, I understand कि एक साल बाद की कहानी है, but अगर आप शुरुआत से इस चीज को समझ के चलोगे, then when you study eventually all the parts of it, you yourself will become a very thoughtful person. Okay, that's why I'm making you understand these things in the beginning. Then we'll start with the syllabus part. So I hope this second part, is it clear to all of you that history in India as well as world, this periodization is now same with world. Okay, not only in India, it is ancient India, then early medieval, medieval, and then finally we have is the modern. So this is the periodization of history which we follow right now. So I think the definition of history is clear to all of you. Okay, second comes this part. Now one more important thing which I want all of you to understand, that how is history written? How do we determine that something is part of history or not, or which specific part is correct or incorrect? कैसे मानते हैं हम कि भाई ये हिस्ट्री है या फिर ये दिस इज अ फ्लॉड रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ फैक्ट्स? How does it happen? History is nothing but interpretation of certain sources. It's an interpretation of sources. Okay. And what are those sources? Sources can be of broadly two kinds. They can be of archaeology, which we'll discuss in detail after it. The second could be literary. Like suppose when Arthashastra was discovered, then some people read it and they came up with their form of interpretation and then applied it to which period? Mauryan period. Right. So this is how history has been written. But if we see largely, there are four prominent schools in India which have touched upon the history writing. So this art of history writing or this form of interpretation, this is known as historiography. This is known as historiography. This you can understand this as a form of algorithm. कैसे उसको उन्होंने प्रोसेस किया है, ठीक है. A simple event can be seen in different light. 50 तरीके से हम उसको इंटरप्रेट कर सकते हैं. Alright. So in India we have these four prominent schools of historiography. The first school came from the British itself and it is known as colonial school. Suppose think of a personality who is very powerful but cruel at the same time. Okay, so from British point of view, how would you think? How would you project it? You would say that there is lack of civilization because the king is barbaric. But if you are from India, which side would you like to see? The magnificence or the power of that king? So as a counter to the first school, which was the colonial school, we see the rise of nationalist school. And they tried to come up with an interpretation which glorified the events of Indian history. Colonial, they tried to make us understand that we have never been civilized. We are uncivilized people. We have always required despotic rulers, and that's why British are ruling us. And that's why all of you must have at least heard about it, that British came to India to civilize the Indians. So they see our history. They were not even able to understand the languages very well. Still they went for interpretations, because what was the main motivation for this school? This school wanted to understand about the people of India so that they can rule us effectively. Plus at the same time, they wanted to shatter our self-confidence so that it would become easy for them to justify their rule. So one thing which we are able to understand, you can pick any event and you can see from different kind of prism. So historiographical school, they are like prism. किसी भी तरीके से देखना चाहते हो, जो उससे चश्मा पहनोगे वैसा आपको स्टोरी दिखने लग जाएगा. Any event can be ridiculed or it can be glorified. Like the Gupta period, the nationalist historians say it was a golden period. But do you see in any period there can be golden kind of progress or period? No. If we see today's India, yes, in comparison to 15 years ago, we are more digitally empowered society. But do you think the violence has declined in today's society from previous generation? No, we cannot claim that. Probably it has increased, right? So at any point of time, critical examination of events is required. We cannot go with just superlative statements कि बस overall एक bracket में एक statement बोला खत्म कर दिया. That's why critical analysis is very important. One more problem with these two schools were, both these schools were just trying to focus on one form of history. We had discussed in the beginning that the scope of history, political, economic, social, technological, art and architecture, culture, it should be in every part or every walk of life. But these first two schools, they limited themselves largely to the arena of politics or the political life and little bit of religion. They did not pay much attention to society. They did not pay much attention to economics of those times. Okay, did not pay even more important the part of India, that was art and architecture. These areas were not explored by these two schools. So that's why their area or the ambit of study, it remained limited in nature. That's why the third school, it is known as Marxist school. This is known as Marxist school because it uses the principles of Karl Marx in the interpretation of history. They say that every event in the human history has been more or less linked to economy. Okay, or the way your economic status is going to decide your actions. That's why the whole socio-economic history became the main area of the working of Marx. As all of you know, Marx believes in that there has always been a bourgeois class and there has always been a working or the proletariat class, and the whole history has been shown as a conflict between these two. And eventually which class is going to win? Proletariat or the working class. So the whole history becomes eventually a kind of class struggle, which was the idea of Karl Marx. And every event they are going to interpret with the help of economic parameters. Like you tell me, frankly, in India, what is more important, class or caste? Naturally, it is caste, right? Because the whole, wherever you go, the first thing which will be asked to you is, what is your caste? And we'll see, when we'll see the social evolution of Indian society, you'll come to understand, in India, always caste has been more important. So that's why there are some limitations of the Marxist school, because they try to impose the principles which were made for European society on Indian society. So those problems eventually come in. Plus, it also was not able to cover the majority of the population. Yesterday we were discussing how many bureaucrats are selected, roughly 1000, and what is the total population of India? 1.4 billion, 3 billion, jo bhi hai. Eventually when the census will be conducted, then we'll know the final figure. Anyway, the important thing is these people eventually become the elite people, right? Similarly, if you see the politicians, the politician कितना होगा इंडिया में जो elect होके आ रहा है eventually in the even in the MP, as an MP or MLA etc. 2-2,500 होगा, ठीक है, roughly like that. So what we are able to see that in every society there are going to be elite people and there are going to be people who are little bit marginalized. So, and it's always there, the elite people are always going to be less. That's why so far in these three schools, okay, the major focus was on the elite people. Like, why do we talk about Ashoka? Why do we talk about Chandragupta Maurya? Why do we talk about Kalidasa? Do you think that these people were the only part of the Gupta period or the Mauryan period? No. There were so many common people, peasant, tribals, etc., women, their role has not been represented. So this fourth school, which is known as subaltern school, this evolved out of the Marxist school itself. Okay, initially it was a sub-school, but later on it eventually became a full-fledged school. And its exclusive focus can be seen on the people, okay, who were marginalized, and that's why this school is often seen as history from below. Rather than seeing it from the top, we should see the history from below. Like, I give you an easy example. You see the Indian national movement, okay? Which name comes to your mind when you talk about Indian national movement? One person, Mahatma Gandhi ji. But do you think it was Mahatma Gandhi ji alone who was responsible for India's freedom? No. Large number of peasants were there, women participated, tribal people participated, and when all of them participated, he was just the face of India. But lots of people participated for India's independence. But in these three schools, not much significance was given to these masses. That's why if you'll see your syllabus, UPSC has specifically mentioned peasant and tribal movements. Why? Because subaltern school. The more academic research is eventually going on in the future, eventually more history will come. Like right now, the major focus in India is on regional history. We are like today we understand that India is a sovereign independent country. Okay, but do you think during the times of the history it was one? It was not. There were lots of smaller kingdoms, lots of subparts of India. That's why understanding India's history from regional history point of view is more important rather than just seeing it from the point of view of India as a whole. That's why history of Rajasthan, history of Haryana, history of Manipur, history of Nagaland, this is now the main basis of study in the universities. Okay, sometimes in interview they ask which part of the history has been left out. हमने ये सारा डिस्कस कर लिया, 4 schools ने किस चीज पे मेन रिसर्च किया, but these are the areas where more research is required. Even the acceptance for LGBT is now increasing in the societies, right? It is increasing. So we should also know about their past, their role in the history. It's not like that these people have come out of the vacuum. They may have been suppressed, but in terms of history, like one of my students, he was doing a research on this topic. Okay, what was the status of LGBT in ancient India? Now this requires a lot of research. Very few books would be written on this topic. You easily understand that, right? Even people afraid in talking about all this. So the next arenas of mostly history is going to be regional history and those groups on which we have never thrown any kind of light. So when in interview they ask frankly about कि ऐसा question पूछा जाता कि which are the areas which require further research. So whenever we'll study ancient, medieval, modern, you can easily find out the gaps. यार ये वाला part पे तो अच्छे से address हुआ ही नहीं है, because उसके ऊपर too much of the books they have not been written, research papers have not been published. Those problems are going to arrive. Okay, so whatever history we know right now, whatever we'll study from various books, it's on the basis of these 4 schools, and this is what is historiography. So these are the 4 major schools of India's historiography, and on the basis of this you're going to get various questions. Sometimes I'll show you some PYQs in the coming classes. When UPSC asks question, in some of the questions they are going to give you the specific kind of historiography and you have to understand the question and answer accordingly. Sometimes the question will be asked from the colonial point of view, okay, sometimes the question will be asked from Marxist point of view. So in those questions you have to identify the school of historiography and then you have to write the interpretation accordingly. Okay, so these are the things which I want you to understand in the beginning. Okay, so this is what I wanted you to understand. Now let us have a quick look on the syllabus of ancient India, because in this also there are lots of keywords which I want you to understand along with what has been given in the NCERT. Like we have already discussed that interpretation is done by the schools and this interpretation is linked with the sources. Okay, and these sources can be of 2 types, archaeological and literary sources. Now we have to understand that within the archaeological sources, what are the specific areas that we can include. So this has been given by UPSC by itself. Syllabus में आपको बता दिया है कि when we talk about archaeological sources, we have various methods like numismatic है, epigraphy है, exploration, monument as well as excavation. In short, archaeology is all about finding out things through various kinds of methods, and literary is all about the books. है ना? Books at that point of time doesn't necessarily mean that they have been written on a piece of paper. They may be written even on the palm leaves. Okay, so all that part is in the literary sources. Now whenever we discuss about sources, as we have just discussed, they are divided into archaeological sources and they are also divided into literary sources. These are the two types of sources that we have. Both of them have strength as well as limitations. Okay, both of them. If we see archaeological sources, their major strength that we know is because when we see the chronology of ancient Indian history, I hope all of you know this already. All of you are aware of the Stone Age? Okay. Then we have Indus Valley Civilization or Harappan Civilization. Then comes Vedic culture. We'll further discuss it in detail, but just for the sake of understanding the sources, I'm dividing it. Okay. When we talk about the first two major period, okay, like we have discussed, 2 million years ago till Indus Valley civilization's decline, है ना? So you can say roughly around 1300 BC. We have to depend only upon which kind of sources? Archaeological sources. Because by that time the invention of writing, initially it was not done, and when it was done during the time of the Indus Valley civilization, they developed a script, but it has not been deciphered till now. It has some 400 signs and they are not deciphered. Now the important thing is, because of the nature of sources for a specific period, we are able to come up with 3 terms. The first part is known as prehistory. So we can directly write Stone Age within it, and here we do not have any written text. So this is the age of prehistory. Then comes proto history. The script is there, but it has not been deciphered. Okay. Now this concept of proto history, it is always going to switch when you see from different kind of subjects. Like when we see from the eyes of archaeologists. So archaeologist का अपना एक अलग फंडा है. They do not divide it on the basis of script. They divide it on the basis of metal. The beginning of the use of metal. तो metal का सबसे पहला use कब हुआ है? In the Chalcolithic period. So that's why they even include Chalcolithic period as a part of proto history. So they do not use this criteria, but more or less as a student of history we should go by this definition. ठीक है ना? Whenever we change the subject, the overall understanding of the concept is also going to change. Like in school we discussed what is a metal, what is a non-metal, है ना? Differentiate करते हैं on the basis of some properties, right? कि metal का क्या property होता है कि हाँ they are good conductors of electricity, और non-metal नहीं होता है. But when you see from the eyes of astrophysicists, those who study the universe, they do not differentiate it on the basis of properties. They say hydrogen and helium, ठीक है, they are the non-metals, और उसके बाद में जो भी है they had become metal. So the whole understanding of any term, it's going to depend upon the underlying subject. So from history point of view, you remember this definition. One time UPSC asked the question in which it used the word proto history along with Chalcolithic period. So that was on the basis of the understanding of archaeologists, okay, not the historians. So that's why I'm making you aware here itself. This is very clear. Prehistory, it just means that we do not have any invention of writing. Here we are able to get the script, but it is not deciphered. From here onwards we have the literary sources. The first major literary sources starts from the period of Vedic culture. Okay, it starts from Vedic culture, and all of you know about them. They are the 4 major Vedas. During the early Vedic period, we have Rig Veda, and during the later Vedic period, we have the remaining 3, Samved, Yajurved, and Atharva Veda. So all of them, they are going to be part of Vedic culture plus literary sources. So overall sources that we have for understanding history, it is divided into archaeology and literary sources. And for the maximum time, if we see the time period 2 million years ago till the end of Harappan Civilization, we do not have any kind of literary sources. And meanwhile, the Vedic period, so roughly अगर हम cut off देखें, literary sources starts from 1500 BC. Before that, we do not have any literary source. So when we talk about strength and weaknesses, one of the major strength of archaeology, it becomes that for the major part of ancient India, we only have the archaeological sources. We do not have the literary sources. One more strength of archaeology, once archaeology comes into the picture, okay, changing it is relatively difficult. Like suppose if you want to understand the technology with which the tools were created during the Stone Age, you can easily see the tool in front of you and you can understand, okay, this was the level of technology. But when you start writing, okay, you can write anything which may or may not be true. Like we have the Allahabad pillar inscription. इसमें जो मन में चाहे लिख दिया. Or if it see Banabhat's Harsh Charita, which has not even written about Shashanka later on, है ना? For that he had taken an oath that I am going to defeat this person. So the major strength of archaeology here, changing the source is relatively difficult. Here it is easy. Like book में क्या करना है, आपको एक पेज ही तो insert करना है. You have to just insert a page. That's why the issues of interpolation are high in literary sources, but they are not in archaeological sources. These are the basics. While understanding sources, we have to understand what is the part of archaeology, what is the part of the literary. All right, just see your concept list. The second part, archaeological terms. Aryan, which concept do you want me to repeat? I'll repeat it. Please tell me. Okay, so there are some concepts which are given with respect to archaeology. The first one, it is known as mound. Mound is nothing but, like suppose this is the area of old Rajendra Nagar. Okay, in future, like suppose after some million years, the earth is gone. Okay, earth or this habitation is gone. So when excavation will be done, then whole of Rajendra Nagar, it will be divided into different parts, and this is known as mounds. So this become mound number 1, mound number 2. So whenever excavation is a word which means literal meaning is digging of earth, and when we do it, we try to identify different forms of information. Okay, we try to preserve it. That's why एक पूरा एक एरिया में एक साथ digging नहीं होता है. It is divided into different parts, and this is how at any place you are going to found different mounds. Like when you read in newspaper that Rakhigadi has become the largest site of Harappan civilization, they are also going to mention that it has 8 mounds. From mound number 2, we have found these artifacts. Artifacts means what kind of information or we are able to get, which objects we have got. That is known as artifacts. So whenever there is going to be excavation, we are going to have artifacts. Like at Mohenjo-daro, we have found a dancing girl, we have found the bearded priest also. So those are nothing, they are the form of artifacts. And Mohenjo-daro, when it divided into different parts, it is known as mound. So this is the first term which you need to understand. Okay. Now whenever digging is done, just see from this point of view, whenever digging is done, it could be done vertically or it could be done horizontally. Okay, so whenever we see vertical excavation, these parts are not going to belong to same period. Why? Because this came earlier, like this may belong to Neolithic, this may belong to Mesolithic, and this may belong to Paleolithic era. So whenever we have vertical excavation, we are going to find artifacts of different periods. And whenever we are going to go for horizontal excavation, we are going to find the same period or same information. तो अब इसको अगर horizontally करोगे तो all artifacts they will belong to Neolithic period. But when you go for vertical excavation, it may belong to different periods. Why are we understanding this? Like there is one theory. All of you know that Harappan civilization declined. So one of the theory with respect to this is the attack by Aryans or Aryan invasion. This is very popular. But the evidence provided by the people, they say that they have found in one specific room there were 37 skeletons. Okay, but these skeletons, okay, they did not belong to one period because they had done vertical excavation. That's why understanding these terms is now important, because when we'll understand the theories, when we'll understand all the other aspects, there you can easily apply this. That's why vertical excavation and horizontal excavation, you're always going to find different forms of information. And as an archaeologist, you have to be very careful. Otherwise, आप कहीं का artifact कहीं बता के अलग history लिख दोगे, right? That's why you need to be very careful. All right. So Aryan is asking about the concept of proto-history. So proto-history is nothing but where the invention of writing has been done. Means we have a script, like we have the Harappan script, but so far it has not been deciphered. So everything we know about Harappan civilization, it is on the basis of archaeology, not literature. बस थोड़ा सा एक literature में part मिलता है. Do you know about that? From where? We have some written records about Harappan civilization, but not from Harappa itself. It's from the Mesopotamians. They have written about Harappan civilization and they have used the word Meluha, right? So they have given some records of imports and exports. So saying that completely absent है, वो गलत होगा. But it is a foreign account. It is not an indigenous account because the indigenous account has not been deciphered. And historical period is from where we have a perfect script, and this has already been deciphered. So these are the points which we need to understand along with the sources. Okay. Now whenever we talk about archaeological sources, in archaeological sources we can have various kinds of categories. Okay, like excavation. Excavation is what is responsible for the understanding of Harappan civilization, and it is a part of archaeology. Similarly, we have numismatic, coins. The study of coins is known as numismatic. And as all of you know, what is the importance of coins? They help us in understanding which kind of metal is used in the first place for the creation of coin, number one. Second, it provides information about some kings, queen who have issued them. It can even make you understand that which area belong to the political dynasty. Not always true. Like अगर इंडिया का कोई नोट आपको अमेरिका में मिलेगा, that does not mean America is under the control of India. There can be exchange of money. But at those point of time, at least we can use it along with other sources for the confirmation or corroboration. So we also study the coins, and coins are going to be very important in post-Mauryan period. We have all these foreign invasions like कौन-कौन सा है? Indo-Greeks, Sakas and Kushanas. So for those time periods, we largely use chronology on the basis of coins. So each source has its importance in different parts of history. Then we see epigraphy. Epigraphy is nothing but inscriptions. Okay, see it from your concept list. There a term has been written, paleography. Any one of you know about it? What is the meaning of paleography? Yes, it's the study of the ancient handwriting. What kind of writing That writing system is known as paleography, the study of ancient writing, and it's a sub part of epigraphy. Whenever we try to read the inscriptions, like we see the inscriptions of Ashoka, we see the inscriptions of Samudragupta. So those inscriptions, that study is known as epigraphy, and while understanding these inscriptions, naturally you have to understand the writing, with uske bina kaise chalega kaam. So that is known as paleography. Sometimes in prelims you may get such keywords, so at least you should know kiska matlab kya hota hai. Okay, then comes exploration. Okay, exploration. What is the meaning of exploration? It just means trying to search out for something. Like one of the most famous cave in India is Bhimbhetka cave. But this Bhimbhetka cave, do you know the time when it was explored for the first time or discovered? It's in 1957, after independence. Okay, Vishnu Vakankar was one person who was traveling by rail, and he saw, yaar kuch alag sa dikh raha hai. He came down and he entered the area, and from Bhimbhetka we are able to understand Upper Paleolithic period, Mesolithic period, Neolithic period. So exploration is very important, and whenever we go for exploration, we come to know of various kind of archaeological sources like natural caves, which were used for habitation by people, right? And largely monument. If you want to understand temple architecture, so what better would be? Just go to the temple and see the architecture. Or if you want to understand about Taj Mahal, you have to just go there and you can understand the art and architecture of the times of the Mughals. Okay, that's why whenever we talk about archaeological sources, it's going to have these kinds of category. This is just indicative in nature. I'm not saying this is final. Whenever you discuss about archaeological sources, it can have n number of categories, like it can have human skeleton, right? When we discuss about evolution, we try to understand on the basis of skeleton. That is also a form of archaeological source. Or we try to find out different kind of crops. And how did we identify which crop was initially sowed? It is on the basis of archaeological sources. Or we find pottery, different kind of objects which were used for different kind of purposes, like you see in your concept of pottery, OCP, BRW, PGW, NBPW. This is also a part of archaeological sources. So any human remain, okay, it can become part of archaeological sources. So archaeological sources has a very wide ambit, and when we discuss these two, literary sources and archaeological sources, archaeological sources is always going to give you information of practical things. Okay, literary में तो कुछ भी लिख सकते हैं हम, but this is eventually going to confirm if something has been written here. If we found it in the form of archaeology, it means it is confirmed. If something is written here and it is not found, then there is always going to be a question mark. So this word which you have to remember, it is known as corroboration, meaning if one source is saying something and the same has been affirmed by the second one, this is known as corroboration. Whenever we write history, whenever we interpret sources, we try to identify 2-3 sources which can give us similar kind of information, and once it is done, it means this event has specifically happened. Okay, just written in literature, it can never confirm, because with literature comes at various kinds of issues which we will discuss later on, right? Whenever we discuss about literary sources, within this literary sources we could have two types of literature. One literature which has been written by the people of India itself, okay, so this is indigenous literature, and then we have the foreign accounts. Within this first category of indigenous literature, we can have different categories of literature. It could be of political manner like Arthashastra. It could be of religious text like the Vedas. It could be scientific in nature like Aryabhatiya. Okay, so the first form of indigenous literature, it could have various kinds of information. But largely, if you see India's historical tradition, India's historical tradition, largely our literature has been religious. That's why, since we have less secular information in the literature, there has been a big question mark which has been raised by British people. They says Indian people did not have any kind of historical sense. उनको पता नहीं था कैसे रिकॉर्ड करना होता है, because maximum information that we get from literature, it is religious in nature, it is not secular. We'll discuss about this concept later on also, but just try to understand sources out of two types. One is archaeological and the second one is literary sources. Both of them are important. We are not saying literature is less important, but the only thing is here the limitations are relatively more. But if you wish to know connected story of any period, can we get it on the basis of archaeology? No, we can never get it. If you want to know the understanding of the Gupta society, can we do it on the basis of archaeological sources? No, we have to go for literature. So both of them have positives and negatives. So I hope I have made myself very clear on this issue. This is what we have been trying to understand. What is history? History is nothing but an interpretation of sources, and this interpretation can be on the basis of various schools of historiography, which we have discussed, plus on the basis of the sources we are trying to find out the history. And since you need to understand that excavation is always going to have limitation. If you wish to know about history of Delhi, we could dig the whole Delhi, but is it possible? It is not possible. So as and when we discover one or the other thing, history is always going to get enriched time after time. Okay? That's why when somebody says it's a dead subject, no. We keep on getting more information and our understanding of the past keeps on getting refined in that manner. Similarly, when this is what we have discussed about mostly about the ancient example. But if we see from the examples of modern India, all of you know there are some sensitive issues on which the records of the government, they are never, you want to say, given to the people directly. All of you know the concept of classified files. These records are kept by the government and they are not given to the people directly. So हर 10 से 15 साल में कुछ नए documents का access is given to the people. Like suppose few decades back, 1 or 2 decades back, the files of Subhash Chandra Bose, they were declassified. Now historians have access to that, and when they have access to more information, can they write more history now? Because the events are now in front of them. Similar things happened in USSR. USSR dissolved in which year? 1991. When it was dissolved, the classified files of the last 6-7 decades, they were now given to the people. Now they can write more history about those periods. So history as a subject is always going to evolve. Just see your NCERT and see the book of Upinder Singh. Even the book of Upinder Singh, it was written in 2011-12. It's been 10 years. अब कोई और नई book की requirement है, which can incorporate the researches of last 10 years. आपके NCERT तो नहीं कितना पुराना लिखा गया है ना, by R.S. Sharma. So that's why the knowledge of history will keep on enhancing and enriching on the basis of the information, and this information will be on the basis of the schools of historiography. So I hope the initial thing which I wanted all of you to understand, you are able to understand these basic things: meaning of history, how history is Indian history has been divided over the years, what is the correct form of dividing history. Third, what is historiography, what are these schools of historiography, and fourth, finally, how the sources are used by these historiographical schools, mainly in the form of archaeology and literary, for the creation of history. This is the basic introduction. Once this is clear, let us start with the topics. Okay? If you have any doubt, you can ask me. Online students, if you have any doubt, you can ask me. So Newton is asking difference between epigraphy and literary sources. So वो differentiation क्या आता है? On the basis of the material. ठीक है? Inscription में largely जो है वो आपका different material, चाहे वो rock पे होगा, metal पे होगा, etc. All those will be there. Literary में specific आपका even on the pages or the paper would be there, palm leaves, etc. तो वैसे उसको divide किया जाता है. All right. Now, one more important concept which I want all of you to understand, what is the difference between culture versus civilization? Like we say Aryan culture, but we use the word Harappan civilization. So what is the basis of division of these two? Because these words are going to come time and again, so you should have a basic understanding. So tell me, what is the difference between these two, culture versus civilization? ठीक है? वो तो ठीक है, वो तो समझ. Okay, so there are two basic parameters on the basis of which we differentiate between culture and civilization. Whenever we talk about civilization, first it's going to have script. Kindly note it down. Whenever you are asked this question, you will be able to give a good answer. First, it's going to have a writing system or a script. And second, a civilization is always going to be linked with urbanization, and as urbanization comes, they're going to have the material culture like buildings, houses of higher level, all those things that come part of civilization. When we talk about Aryans, we have not seen archaeological sources, बहुत ही कम मिलते हैं हमें. But if you see Harappan civilization at different places, whenever you excavate, you find new objects, right? We'll learn about that, what were the characteristics of Harappan civilization. But these are the two major characteristics. And in other words, we can say culture is something which is internal to a person or to a people. This is what culture is all about. Alright, while civilization specifically talks about the outer things, which includes script and urbanization. This is the basic difference which you should remember between culture and civilization. There can be n number of definitions, but I have just pointed out the two major areas on the basis of which we differentiate between culture and Online students, am I live again? ठीक है. I think it is back now. Some problem was there, but we are live now, right? Okay, okay. Let us start. So, कोई question पूछ रहे थे आप? Any question of any kind? Culture is more about, अगर differentiate करोगे, यहाँ पे आपका mostly art वाला type आता है, ठीक है ना? What is the art? Like if you're connected to music, the language you speak, all those parts, that is what culture is. So it's an internal part of the human being. It cannot be, दो तरीके से बोलते हैं ना, something which can be proved, है ना? तो जो वो चीज है वो आपकी आती है civilization में, like the writing system, like urbanization. So this is something which is tangible, this is intangible. Right? So this is the differentiation between culture versus civilization. Civilization should have these two components, a writing system and second of urbanization. These two things are required. Now let us try to understand the topics. Whenever we discuss about the first topic of ancient India, this is about Stone Age. Okay, why Stone Age? Because we see the use of some basic tools by the ancient men. That's why we see the word Stone Age. Initially, the Stone Age was divided into two periods. It was Old Stone Age and New Stone Age, which eventually came to known as Paleolithic and Neolithic. You have to remember that the distinction of Stone Age, the overall distinction, it's on the basis of two factors. The first factor is tools. The second factor is mode of their subsistence. Subsistence means when you're going for production only for self-consumption, not for the market. That is known as mode of subsistence. Like initially these people in Paleolithic period, they were only dependent upon hunting and food gathering. Hunting and food gathering. So that eventually came to known as the Old Stone Age. And in the New Stone Age, the Neolithic period, we see the development of villages plus the beginning of agriculture. So the mode of sustenance changed, right? Initially it was hunting and food gathering. Now we have changed to agriculture. So these are the two methods on the basis of which Stone Age was characterized early. But later on, with researches, we see its differentiation into three: Paleolithic, Mesolithic was also added, known as Middle Stone Age, and then we have is Neolithic. But there was one more problem. The age of Paleolithic, it was very large. It was very large. Its time period was 2 million years ago. Okay, starting from 2 million years ago till 10,000 BC. So we had to create some distinction within Paleolithic also, so that we can understand in a better manner. That was eventually done. Paleolithic was divided into three parts. The oldest one is known as Lower Paleolithic, then comes Middle, then comes Upper. ये बस याद रखना, lower is the oldest one, upper is the youngest one in terms of Paleolithic. Now you can even remember their time period also. The Lower Paleolithic start from 2 million years ago all the way up to 1 lakh BC. Okay, 2 million years ago till 1 lakh BC. That is known as Lower Paleolithic. In the middle, we see 1 lakh BC till 40,000 BC, and in upper, we see from 40,000 all the way up to 10,000 BC. All right. So Paleolithic, it's about the oldest part of Stone Age. This oldest part of Stone Age can be divided into three parts: lower, middle, and upper. The time period of lower, it is from 2 million years ago all the way up to 1 lakh BC. The middle, it starts from 1 lakh and goes up to 40,000, and then the last one, the upper, it starts from 40,000 and goes up to 10,000. You can just remember it. ठीक है, कभी भी प्रीलिम्स में कोई ऐसा फैक्चुअल क्वेश्चन आता है, इट इज गोइंग टू हेल्प यू. ऑप्शनल में यूपीएससी आपसे ऐसे क्वेश्चन नहीं पूछेगा. दिस इज जस्ट फॉर द सेक ऑफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग. देन कम्स द मेसोलिथिक. बट बिफोर गोइंग अप टू मेसोलिथिक, लेट अस ब्रीफली अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट वाज द लाइफ ऑफ Paleolithic period. Okay, the life of Paleolithic period. Majority of these people, they lived in and around natural caves. That's what is known as habitation. Okay. As all of you know, there is a map paper, 50 marks. That 50 marks paper is going to have some sites. How many sites? Do you have any idea? Let us just have a look at it. Right. This is the paper of 2022. So, why this Stone Age becomes important? Because they will give you a map of India. It could be India का Indian subcontinent है पूरा, alright. it may come as political, like last year it was political, in 21 it was physical. Both kinds of map can come. Here they are going to mark some sites, and then on the basis of the keywords you have to identify them. Like the first, they have given the first site, it is Paleolithic site. Second, Mesolithic with burial. Third, Neolithic, early agri village settlement. Neolithic, Chalcolithic. So we have seen first 6 sites, and all of these sites, they come from roughly Stone Age. So even though UPSC doesn't ask many questions from Stone Age, but in the map paper, they're going to ask from these areas. That's why we have to understand them. Why? Because you don't only have to identify the site, you have to also write its description in how many words? 25 to 30 words. And in those areas, we can use these information directly. Okay, that's why basic information is required. Second, if we see the nature of society, like today all of us know how the humans live, but in those times, the kind of society, a very small society, that is known as band society. It means people lived in a closed group, very small population was there, and it was not more than 100. So the kind of society, it was known as band society. Okay, this is what we know. Third, they depended upon hunting and food gathering. They depended upon hunting and food gathering. And finally, the technology was mostly related to the stone. They did not use any kind of metal, which will come from the Chalcolithic period, not here. So technology, but this technology also got refined with the period of time. Like as we have just characterized Paleolithic period into 3 parts, lower, middle and upper. So during the lower, they were using the most primitive type of technology. So you have to just remember, in the first part they use core. Core means, जैसे आपने देखा, a big stone, okay, not polished from any side. So that big boulder, that is known as a core technology. When the stone is sharpened from one side, this technology is known as flake, and when it is sharpened from both sides, this is known as blade. So these were the type of technology which were used by them during lower Paleolithic, during middle, and finally upper. Okay, if you can remember them, whenever a site comes, you can easily write this information. This was the level of their technology, and they were just building the stone tool. Right now, I'm not going into the material which has been used, kaun sa hard tha, kaun sa soft, etc., etc. We are not even using the maps and those things, because we'll do it at a second level in the core classes. Right now, it's just about making you understand that when we discuss history period wise, it will start with the Paleolithic period. Okay, so this is what you need to understand. This is the technology. All right. Now the second part, it is known as Mesolithic. As we have just discussed, that previously it was not considered as a part of the Stone Age, it was a new or the middle Stone Age. So what new things happened during this Mesolithic period that it was given this recognition? Roughly Mesolithic period, it's from 10,000 BC is where we see the cutoff of the upper Paleolithic. This is from where the Mesolithic will start, and this go roughly till 7,000 BC in Indian subcontinents. Okay, in Indian subcontinent. The features which led to creation of this characterization, first was beginning of animal husbandry. So this one thing you have to remember, that humans, they learned animal husbandry first, and later on they started their agriculture. So this began in Mesolithic period. This was the period where the environment, the general environment of Earth became warmer. This led to rise of population. As all of you can see, Canada is such a vast country, but how many people live there? इंडिया के साथ कंपेयर करेंगे तो बहुत बड़ा डिफरेंस है. Even though India is smaller, so it means whenever we have good climate, we are always going to have more population. And this was the reason. The basic community life, where we engage with people on larger scale, this community life also developed during the Mesolithic period. This was the time where smaller tools from 2 to 5 centimeter, and they were mostly used as projectiles for killing the animals. These kinds of tools are known as microlith. They began during this period. Okay, so because of these factors, change of technology, change of subsistence mode, Mesolithic period was recognized. Okay, so the time period you can remember 10,000 to 7,000, and along with you can remember the remaining part. Then comes one of the most revolutionary period known as Neolithic period. What we have seen during the first two periods, Paleolithic and Mesolithic, human remains nomad. Nomad means moving from one place to another. And what is the basic urge for doing so? It is the search for food. We were not having any permanent source. Like right now, we are able to stay in our urban areas. Why? Do we do any production here? No. The production is happening in the villages. From there, with the help of transportation, we are able to get everything. Everything is available to us. This was the time, Neolithic period, where we see the beginning of agriculture. The beginning of agriculture, which was remarkable. Remarkable because now humans could easily settle down at some places. And that's why we see the beginning of village settlements. The famous places like Mehergarh, these were the initial village settlements. This was the time where we see development of pottery, because once you have agriculture produce, you required some utensils where you can store them. Okay, so this was a time where we see one of the most fundamental invention, that is of wheel. As you all of you can easily understand, the transportation system of humans, it's on the basis of wheel. That's why trade and commerce, it increased. Trade and commerce increased because now they can make carts, and with the help of this they can go to wider places. So that's why Neolithic period has been considered as a kind of revolution by one of the archaeologists, and his name is V. Gordon Childe. We are not going to go into the debate. The debate is about what is a revolution, should we call it revolution or evolution, that we'll do later on. But this is how he defines Neolithic period. That's why he uses the word Neolithic revolution. Okay, this is done by V. Gordon Childe. Yes. हाँ, तो न्यूलिथिक का जो टाइम पीरियड है इज रफली फ्रॉम 7000 to 3000 BC. Why do we do so? हम इतना गैप लेके क्यों चलते हैं? That reason lies in what I explained earlier, regional history. Some part of Indian subcontinent, their Neolithic period started early, At other places, it was a little bit late. Okay, in some places like Northeast India, it started around 2000 BC. So, अगर आप overall Indian subcontinent, it may stretch even up to 1000, but जो roughly रखते हैं हम range 7000 to 3000. These are all approximate. अगर आप इसके आसपास भी लिखोगे in answers, nobody is going to give you negative marks for that, because if you read two books, दोनों में different answer होता है, जिसका कोई standardization आज तक हो ही नहीं पाया. ठीक है, तो बस आप अप्रोक्सीमेट याद रखो एंड डोंट गेट कंफ्यूज्ड बिकॉज ऑफ कि ये गलत हो जाएगा. द लार्जर अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज दिस इज जस्ट अ रेफरेंस. ओके, नाउ comes the Chalcolithic period. The first time we see the use of metal. Copper was the metal. Within this Chalcolithic period, we have two types of areas. One is your Harappan civilization, and second is other cultures. These cultures mostly used copper. Harappans, they used bronze. We'll discuss about these other cultures also. These are contemporary civilization, Egyptian as well as Mesopotamian. Other cultures within Indian subcontinent. So, if you see Indian subcontinent, so this was the focal point of Harappan civilization. This is one more skill which I want all of you to learn, at least a representative map of India. It's never going to be perfect, but थोड़ा सा बनाना सीख लो. In papers, it's always going to be useful. Okay, so this was the area of Harappan civilization, but there were some other cultures like this area of Maharashtra. Here we find the famous Jorve culture. Here we find Rangpur culture. Okay, in this area intersection during the late, we find Ahar, Vanas culture. So various forms of other cultures also developed. Okay, and some of them were during the late Harappan phase. Let me discuss that. Okay, Sonali will discuss it in a while. Okay, let me finish this topic, then I'll take your questions. Now, when we talk about Harappan civilization, Harappan civilization is not like कि भाई उसका same characteristics रहा throughout. The first phase, it is known as early Harappan. Early Harappan phase, okay, which during this time we see the beginning of what we can say centralization, right? And the time period for this early Harappan is from 3300 till 2600 BC, roughly 700 years. Then comes the mature Harappan phase, the phase in which the civilization was in full flow. Big cities like Harappan, Mohenjo-daro, etc., they were carved out. That comes in the mature Harappan phase. Then comes the late Harappan phase. In this late Harappan phase, we see the downfall of the urban characteristics, script as well as urbanization. They went away. This was the late Harappan phase from 1900 till 1300 BC. Okay, so some of these cultures which we just seen on the map, they were contemporary to Harappan civilization. Some of them, they were during the late Harappan phase. In general, when we say Harappan civilization, we refer to the mature phase. These major areas like Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Rakhigadi, the major research is done on the mature Harappan phase. Okay, the early phase has some cities like Kot Diji, okay, like Amri, where we see the initial construction of a cities, proto cities. That is the phase of early Harappan. And late Harappan, where we see the downfall of Harappan civilization. There are lots of theories about its rise as well as about its decline. You must have heard, when we talk about rise, somebody say it was made by the Mesopotamians only, you know, but that has not been given much weightage. Reason being, the way Harappan civilization was there and the way Mesopotamia was there, there were marked differences. Like the quality of bronze used by the Mesopotamians, it was way superior to the Harappan. The manner in which the Harappan cities were created, they were way better than the Mesopotamian cities. If we talk about the cities of Harappa, they had certain characteristics. What are those characteristics eventually? Like you can see the roads, they cut at right angles. Okay. The whole pattern of city, if we see, on the western side, they had the ruling class, and this was known as citadel or palace, and this area, this was known as lower town or the area where the common people lived. So it means city was divided into two parts in general. Some places we even see a middle town, like places like Dholavira. वहाँ पे तीन भी मिल जाएगा आपको. But majority of the city layout, it was like this. They had a very good drainage system. Drainage system was there. Okay, so the major characteristics of any urban city, they can be seen in the Harappan civilization. But such things were not there in Mesopotamian civilization. Such a refinement was not there. That's why we do not consider that theory. Then one more theory which is often said that may be responsible for the Harappans. This was the theory of that Aryans were the makers of Harappan civilization. But with the recent researches, we are able to see that Aryans entered Indian subcontinent only in which time? 1500 BC. So it was not possible for them to construct the Harappan civilization. So right now, the most important theory for the evolution of Harappan civilization, it is the indigenous evolution theory. In this, we use the creation of villages during the Neolithic period, then the early urban phase of the early Harappan phase, and finally the mature Harappan phase. The most famous person who has worked on this is M.R. Mughal. We'll discuss about that later on. किसने उस theory को दिया है? Who has eventually done that kind of differences and similarities has been inherited, है ना? वो सब हम बाद में करेंगे. Anyway, so whenever we talk about Harappan civilization, this is the first important topic of our syllabus. Reason being, UPSC always asks one question from Harappan civilization. Time and again you are going to find it in news, है ना? News में आपको कोई ना कोई article इस पर मिल ही जाने वाला है. So this is going to become one of the most important part of your syllabus, and mostly UPSC is going to ask questions from origin and from decline. When it comes to decline, again we found various theories. Some says it was because of the Aryan invasion, but as we have just seen, the decline started by 1900 itself, so Aryans cannot be responsible for this. So the latest theory which is going to be important for this is the theory of climate change or ecological imbalance. So climate change was the one, or the ecological imbalance was the one which was responsible for the downfall of Harappan civilization. Lots of researches keep on coming on this. Like recently in 2012, there was a monsoon link theory, that the shifting of monsoon from Pakistan area towards the eastern Gangetic Valley, because of which we see the downfall of civilization. IIT Kanpur came up with the research that there was a drought for many years which was responsible for decline of Harappan civilization. This remains one of the most hot topic in terms of researches, in terms of the coverage by the newspaper. But we are going to discuss a lot of things in the later classes. So with respect to Harappan, you have to remember the areas where it was prominent, and along with this we had other cultures, but these cultures were not able to use bronze. They mostly used copper. Plus these cultures did not have script or any form of urbanization. Right. So from map point of view, these sites are very important. Whatever we have studied so far, like Stone Age as well as Chalcolithic period में ये जो आपका other culture, from map point of view they're very important. But from question point of view, the most important topic is Harappa, its origin, its decline, its trade network, all those characteristics of urbanization. These are the areas where we'll put a lot of focus. Okay. And as we have seen, still so far, the maximum learning, it's on the basis of which sources? Archaeological sources. Now the things are going to change with the coming of Aryans. With the coming of Aryans. Mostly the most accepted view जो हमारे पास में है अभी, it is that these people came from Central Asia. They came from there, and the Aryan period is further divided into Rig Vedic and later Vedic. This is from 1500 to 1000. This is from 1000 to 600. This is the time period from where we learn the evolution of Indian society, polity on major level. For Harappan civilization, we are not able to comment on polity. Nothing has been deciphered. We are not able to see even the social stratification, how the social stratification was done in the society. We are not able to see, other than basically the material things like houses, jewelry, etc. That is also a form of differentiation. But this is the time from where we are going to see the evolution of so many things. So in those sense, if we see India's culture, it mostly comes from the Vedic Aryans, because before it, whatever we do, since we do not have the literary sources, so our understanding remains half-hearted. No, ho hi nahi pata, finish hi nahi ho pata kabhi. So from here you're going to see the evolution. Here the major source is also going to shift from archaeology to literary. For Rig Veda will give information about the early Vedic or the Rig Vedic society, and for later Vedic period we have Samved, Yajurved, and then finally the Atharvaved. This is how the sources are differentiated on the basis of the information that they provide. Rig Veda is going to provide information from 1500 to 1000 BC, and the remaining these three from 1000 BC all the way up to 600 BC. So this is how the sources are going to change from archaeology to literary. Yes. Copper. Because eventually they were using the copper along with one more metal. Tin use कर लिया तो bronze बन गया. तो largely it's an umbrella of Chalcolithic. Copper is the being used. और वहाँ पे बस copper के साथ में mix भी कर दिया. But largely तो वो copper ही रहा ना. ठीक है. Copper भी use हुआ, but largely they were using bronze. Which comes from which metal? It comes from copper. है ना. जब भी हम किसी के लिए वो बनाते हैं एलॉय वगैरह बनाते हैं तो परसेंटेज में मिक्स करते हैं. लार्जली इट इज कॉपर हेयर सर. इसलिए ब्रॉन्ज एज सिविलाइजेशन और कॉपर एज स्टार्ट हो गया कि कॉपर इज नाउ बीइंग यूज्ड बाय द सिविलाइजेशन. Before this, we were only dependent upon stone for making various kinds of tools, which we have discussed already. हाँ, कॉपर ही है और क्या है, ठीक है, वो तो बस उसका आप कुछ भी कर लो. Once you have copper, you can make any alloy. Okay, so it is copper only. हाँ, Chalcolithic का लगभग सेम टाइम पीरियड रहता है आपका, 3000 से लेके आपका 1000. डिफरेंट प्लेसेस, डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ टाइम पीरियड यू आर गोइंग टू फाइंड. लाइक फॉर जॉर्वे कल्चर इट इवन गोज अप टू 700 BC, बट वो एरिया स्पेसिफिक चेंज होता रहता है, ठीक है. बट रफली आप रख सकते हो स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम 3000 BC ऑल द वे अप टू 700, और 1000 भी लेते तो भी कोई इश्यू नहीं है. नाउ व्हेन वी सी वैदिक एज, there is a marked differentiation between early Vedic period and later Vedic period. Initially, it was more of a tribal society. Tribal society means the differentiation between people on the basis of status, on the basis of economy, on the basis of possession, it was very less. So the status of majority of the people of the tribe, they were same. That's why it was a tribal society. There was a king, but the responsibility of king was very limited in nature. Okay, the major responsibility of the king used to be only as a military commander. Governance was not the main category of the king. That's why using the word king itself is not correct. All right, so that's why here we need to remember the major role of the king. It was only the warfare behalf of tribe, because there used to be wars between these tribes. Later on, what was this Mahabharata? This was nothing but it was about the war between these tribes. So warfare remained an important feature of the society of Aryans. But still, during early Vedic period, we see a tribal society with very less distinction between people. Second, the role of the king, it was limited to the defense of the people. At this point of time, society was mostly pastoral in nature. Pastoral means they were not having agriculture as such. They were dependent upon cow. That's why the importance given to cow even till today. It comes from which society? From the Vedic society, because this was the biggest possession that these people were having. Any kind of private property in land, it was non-existent. That's why it remained a pastoral society during this time. The distinction between people, they were just beginning. The Varna system, which will eventually take the form of caste system, was just beginning at this point of time. In this, when we talk about Varna system, the 10th book of Rig Veda. Rig Veda has 10 books, okay, total 10 books. The earliest books are from 2 to 7, and later on book number 1, 8, 9 and 10 were added to this. The 10th book of Rig Veda, it consists of a hymn known as Purusha Shukta hymn. This talks about the Varna system. This Varna system was initially on the basis of color of people. The Aryans who came from Central Asia, they were white. The indigenous people, they were black. That's why the initial Varna, it was on the basis of Arya versus non-Arya. This is what the Varna was all about initially, on the basis of the color of the skin. But later on, this was further distinguished in the Purusha Shukta hymn into Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and finally Shudra. But even this was on the basis of the profession. It was not hereditary. Like, what is the system right now in the society? You are born in a particular caste, your caste cannot be changed. Here, this could be done. The Varna could be changed because it was linked to profession. Right? Like the profession of teaching, it belongs to Brahmana. The profession of fighting, warfare belongs to Kshatriya. Doing different form of business, agriculture, it went to Vaishya. And the duty of the Shudra was to serve the upper three Varnas, or a kind of hospitality. And this was linked to the profession of the people. So, literally, if we see it, within one family, people could have different kind of Varnas. This was possible during the Rig Vedic society. So, this was the earliest form of social differentiation or social stratification. That's why if you wish to understand today's society, you have to learn these things. ये आया कहाँ से है? From where does it come eventually? So initially it was not the caste system or the jati system. Initially it was Varna system. With the period of time, different kind of subcategories of all these started, like Brahmanas, various subcategories. Similarly, Kshatriya, Vaishya, as well as Shudras. And this Varna system, by the time of the Guptas, it eventually became a jati system, or the which system? Caste system. So it's a evolution of how many years? कितने साल लगे? Starting from 1500 BC, by the end of the Guptas, by around 500. So 2000 years it took for this system, which began merely as a differentiation on the basis of color, to eventually become a caste system. So this is how, whenever we discuss the main period wise, we discuss all the aspect of society. Whenever we say society, society has many elements which we try to recognize. Okay, in any society, we try to understand first the stratification, which we have just seen. It's the Varna system here. Then other institution of society, you should always remember these points. Like one of the institution is a marriage. Okay, marriage itself has lots of characteristics. What are those characteristics? Who is in power eventually? Characteristics, है ना? different तरीके से इसको differentiate किया था. It could be on the basis of patriarchy dominate कर रही है या फिर matriarchy dominate कर रही है. Like in majority of India, where domination belongs to men, and that is known as patriarchy driven. Within this, marriage itself can also be arranged. It could be love marriage or it could be forced marriage. Those different kinds of marriages are also going to discuss later on. Okay, this is another part of this. Third, how much freedom was given to women by the society? Because largely, initially they were allowed for the education, but starting from later Vedic period onwards, the access to education, it started declining. Which was the role which was given to women in the society? Why do they take care of home even till today in majority of North India? The reason being the patriarchy, the domination, which eventually gave a specific role to them. Okay, so it all starts with this basic building block of society, which starts from Rig Veda. We try to understand the kind of education which was provided to the society or the various people. It could be related to religion, it could be related to secular aspect, the specific ritual, like all of you know कि उपनयन ceremony होता है एक, ठीक है ना, जनेऊ पहनाते हैं. This is at the time of the initiation into education. So whenever we discuss about society, UPSC asks these kind of questions in exam. What was the transition of society from early Vedic to later Vedic period? So what are the pointers on the basis of which you are going to differentiate a society? These are going to be your subheadings. So every institution has certain characteristics and you have to remember this. Without this, we are never going to write very good answers. But this is one thing which we'll learn with the period of time. But here, let us go back to the basic examples which we were discussing, that during early Vedic period, first, tribal society largely. Second, the power of the king, it was very less. It was more of a military commander. Pastoral society, living on animal husbandry, and we see the beginning of the Varna system, but the society was flexible. Flexible means mobility in the society was there. One could change their status by changing their profession. But all such things started changing from later Vedic period. Okay, so what happened? First of all, we see the decline of tribal characteristics, because as all of you know, with the period of time, there are always going to be elite people and there are always going to be commoner people. The differentiation is less in tribal, but it started declining from later Vedic period onwards. The power of the king, it increased immensely. Kings started performing various kinds of rituals, Ashwamedha sacrifice, Vajapaya, Rajasuya, different kinds of sacrifices were done by the king for increasing his own power, for reducing competition. We see shift towards agriculture. Settled. Initially they were nomad, going from one place to another. Then we see the beginning of agriculture and settled life started. Changing of Varna. The mobility in the Varna started declining from this time onwards. It was now getting linked to birth. Once you are born in a specific Varna, you should not change it. So this restriction, the mobility started declining from later Vedic period. Alright. Plus, largely if we see in terms of religion, this is also a time where we see the difference in the religion of early Vedic and later Vedic period. In terms of religion, when we see early Vedic period, there were three primary gods. Okay, are you aware about them? कौन थे? सबसे महान कौन थे during early Vedic? Indra. Okay, Indra, Agni and Varuna. These three were the prominent gods. Alright, during the early Vedic period, and these were nothing but personification of the forces of nature. Like thunderstorm became Indra, Agni or the fire became Agni. Personification. Personification means a specific force of nature is represented in the body of a human being. This is how the concept of gods was brought in during the early Vedic period. By later Vedic period, we see the change of the gods also. We see the beginning of the famous Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh. These are going to start from later Vedic period. Initially, the puja, it was mostly done for materialistic thing. है ना? क्या क्या होता है materialistic में? है ना? They ask for what? Pashu, Praja. These are the things that they ask for. Later on, during later Vedic period, we see the shift towards Upanishads, the shift towards liberation. Okay. So this is how religion also started changing from early Vedic period to later Vedic period. These transitions we are going to do in detail later on, because every aspect requires a certain kind of understanding. But generally what you need to understand, Vedic period is just an age of transition in Indian culture, where we see for the first time the importance of king. Before this we do not know anything about king, queens, nothing of that sort. And here also we have limited information, but we are able to understand their characteristic. Similarly, during the early Vedic period, we see some democratic assemblies. Sabha and Samiti. Sabha was the assembly of the elders, and Samiti was the of the common people. And in both these assemblies, women used to participate during the early Vedic period. It means they did participate in the political life of the tribe. But this was reduced during the later Vedic period, where they were no longer allowed to participate in the functioning of Sabha and Samiti. So we see some part of democratic functioning within the Rig Vedic society, which is going to decline during the later Vedic period. So this is the period where we will study in detail about change in polity, change in economy, overall change in society as such, as well as religion. When you read NCERT also, these are the 4 major dimensions which has been covered in the NCERT also. तो उसको एक बार read करो, ठीक है? Later on, when we'll have the main core classes, we'll go jump into each and every concept. But one thing which is very important, before trying to understand specifically that, you need to build the blocks. Like whenever we talk about polity, you have to learn these keywords. What is the meaning of monarchical? Where do we use the word democratic? Where do we use the word republic? That's why I was telling you, while reading history, the basic blocks of each and every subject are also going to be formed. ये वर्ड्स कब यूज करने हैं नहीं करने वो धीरे धीरे आपको ट्रांजिशन में समझ में आएगा. पॉलिटी में पावर किसके हैंड्स में है, ठीक है? Whenever we talk about polity, like just see today's India system, what do we have? We are a republic. What is the meaning of republic? Yes, head of the state is elected. It may be direct, it may be indirect. Like in India, we have indirect, but head of the state is elected. Below that, we have the democratic assemblies. Those 2 democratic assemblies, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. And as we already know that in India, we have prime ministerial form of government. Okay? Below these politicians, we have the bureaucracy. So whenever we talk about political life, we do try to understand all this, monarchical, democratic as well as republic, but we also try to understand the bureaucracy. What function has been devolved to these people? Like all of you know, the civil services has been created and they have a certain agenda to be fulfilled. Like we have the services of Indian Administrative Service, Police Service, Revenue Service, and all of them, they have different sorts of goals and objectives. So similarly, at that point also, we are trying to understand what kind of bureaucracy is there. One more important thing which you need to understand, that whenever there is a state, what is the meaning of a state? We say India is a state. What is a state? State means it is going to have 4 parts. It starts with the citizens or the people. Second, a specific territory. Third, they are going to form a government, plus they are going to have sovereignty, means they are of independent from external control. When these 4 things are there, it eventually becomes an abstract concept of state. Okay, so once you understand that what is the meaning of state, these 4 things are there. So when we apply this in early Vedic period, okay, let us try to apply it. At early Vedic period, why we are saying a tribal? These are nomad people. It means the concept of state is not there. Okay, the concept of state is not there because the territory is not there. People are moving from one place to another. Okay, so while understanding these topics, you have to also clear out all these ideas which literally are not part of history, they are part of polity. But we have to do that because without understanding them, we will not be able to write good answers. So this is about the transition which we have to understand. कि polity में क्या transition हुआ? By the level of democratic functioning is going to decline during the later Vedic period, and even the participation of the women was restricted during later Vedic period Similarly, the power of the monarchy or the king is going to increase during the later Vedic period. Or do we see any form of republic? Examples are there, but we are not sure, because there was not just one tribe, there were large number of tribes. We are not talking about Rig Vedic from one tribe point of view. There were many tribes. And finally, when we talk about bureaucracy, initially there were only 2 to 3 major functionaries. Like Purohit used to be there, the chief priest, right? That like that. But this bureaucracy is going to expand later on, and roughly 16 bureaucratic posts has been mentioned in later Vedic period. So whenever UPSC asks this question, how do we see the evolution of polity in the Vedic period, you have to first talk about early Vedic and then compare it with later Vedic. Similar is the criteria with economy. Like in economy, like I have just told you, initially they were dependent upon pastoral society, cow, okay, for their needs, and that's why the concept of or the importance of milk, ghee, etc. This can be seen during the early Vedic period. Later, they shifted towards agriculture. Within economy, there are so many concepts which we need to understand. Like, do we see monetization of economy? Monetization of economy means, were there coins? No. So during early Vedic as well as later Vedic, we do not see any form of monetization of economy. Demonetization to samne suna? The opposite is monetization. So monetization of economy was not there. It means coins had not been started by either Indus Valley civilization or by the Vedic period, full Vedic period. The coinage is going to start from 600 BC, from Mahajanpada period. So the second concept which we can see in economy, it's about monetization of economy. Is it there or not there? Similarly, we talk about what were the forms of private property. Like right now, all of us have a house. There is process of registry also. What does it mean? It means there is property or private property is there. But at this point of time, there were land as a source of private property was not there. That's why the major attraction or the major wealth, it was cows, and the wars were fought for the possession or the accumulation of number of cows. The person who was having maximum number of cows was very wealthy during the Vedic period. So this is how we try to understand. We create the building blocks first of the topic. जब हम पॉलिटी एक बार समझ लेंगे कि हाँ उसमें ये 4 चीजें हमें चेक करना है, then when the next topic is going to come, Mahajanpada, you'll already be aware of all this. ठीक है? So Vedic period is going to end around 600 BC. From 600 BC, we are going to see lots of new developments, and this is known as the age of Mahajanpadas. Okay, so what is the meaning of Mahajanpadas? That we need to understand. During the early Vedic period, we see the concept of Jana. Jana means people. By later Vedic period, we started seeing the concept of Janpada. These people were now becoming conscious of territory. Pada means territory. And when these territories became very wide, this eventually came to known as Mahajanapada. And this is the time of the rise of two religions, Buddhism and Jainism. Okay, Buddhism and Jainism. Roughly 62 sects became prominent in 600 BC. Means these people came up with their various religious philosophies, but only 2 among them took the shape of religion. What is the difference between sect and religion? There are 3 parameters. First, there should be a canon, a holy book. A holy book should be there, number 1. Second, there should be a priestly class which is going to teach that holy book. And third, you should have a large followership. When all these 3 things merge, it eventually becomes a religion. Okay, in rest of the sect, one or the other thing is not going to get satisfied. That's why we see the rise of various philosophy. That's why sometimes we use the word, this was the age of intellectual movement. People were thinking differently in different forms. But out of these 62, we see the creation of only Buddhism and Jainism as major religion. Another theme from where UPSC asked many questions, because there were various factors for the rise of Buddhism and Jainism. And one of the factor was linked to the rise of Mahajanpada. So in India, we have these 16 major states. The 16 major states, and the reference point, the source or their names are given in the text of Buddhism and Jainism. This is from where we get to know about them. Like we have Bhagavati Sutra, Anguttara Nikaya. These are the two major which provide information about Buddhism and Jainism sources about 16 major states. And as all of you know, the most powerful state became the Magad, which eventually transformed into the Mauryan Empire. By which time? 321 BC. Or roughly mixed the date. Somebody says 324, some says 321. By Chandragupta Maurya was able to create the Mauryan dynasty. Starting from 600 BC, we will see many revolutionary developments. First, the rise of the state system. As we have just discussed, all these four things were now getting satisfied. That's why it became an eventual state system from this time onwards. And from this time onwards, when we'll discuss about state, further parameters are going to come. Like you see Indian state. Indian state, what is the basis of Indian state? Like in preamble we have written, we are the people of India. So eventually it's the unity of people which is even getting recognized. Like India is now today run on the basis of Indian Constitution. So that become the basis of the unity of India, other than the people who had created a constitution for themselves. So similarly, these states also had some philosophical foundations. And majorly, we'll later on see, it was the Dharma Shastra model, which we'll discuss tomorrow. क्या होता है वो, ठीक है? But this is how the state system, which starts as Jana in the early Vedic period, it means people. People started, which became Janpada with the defining of territories, and eventually it became Mahajanpada, or the creation of the state by 600 BC. 16 prominent ones were there, including Magda, Avanti. These 16 states were of both kind. Some of them were monarchy, other were republics. But largely the republic word has not been accepted by many people, many historians in fact. They say they were oligarchy. Oligarchy means, monarchy means rule of one person. Oligarchy means rule of few selected people. कि हाँ 15-20 की assembly हो सकती है. That is known as oligarchy. Republic means the person should be elected. That is the criteria. But we do not know exactly if they were there or not there. ठीक है, वो आज तक हम prove नहीं कर पाए हैं, even though various theories has been given by many people. ठीक है, so today we'll stop here. Today we'll stop here. Eventually, if you'll see, we have covered today the first period of Stone Age. Then we covered the Chalcolithic and the Harappan Civilization. Then we discussed about the later Vedic period, early Vedic period, and just introduced the Mahajanpada period or 600 BC. Tomorrow we'll cover the rest of the syllabus. We'll have an overview of all of this along with the concept list which has been given to you. Kindly just go through these words. Tomorrow I'm going to take them one by one also. Plus we'll finish the syllabus first. Today I discussed the first 1 hour. It was mostly in terms of the basic foundation of history. So I would like all of you to revise it, and we'll meet tomorrow and we'll take it further. Okay. No, Sonali, the pastoral community, it starts from the Mesolithic period itself, not from all sites, but some of them. Like Bagor is one area in Rajasthan from where we found it. Excavation mound like single, major, multi, it means from some mound we found only single kind of site, alright. Multiculture means from single mound you may found information or artifacts about various culture, like it could be Paleolithic as well as Mesolithic. So it's a multiculture site. Major means the defining mound where we have the most important information. right? This Oriental and Cambridge, this is roughly, in initial school was Orientalist and later on it had become the Cambridge, and both of them, they are eventually the British itself. We don't have to go too much into the differences, that is not our area of study, उसको पढ़ने का जरूरत नहीं है, बस याद कर लो, roughly इनको use भी कर सकते हो synonymously, because it will not be wrong. All right, so I hope that is enough for today. We'll meet tomorrow at the same time. I'll take it further and we'll finish majority of the foundation of ancient India tomorrow. Okay, thank you.